Ladies and gentlemen, I recently was introduced to the videos of Julian Simon, S-I-M-O-N. Thank you for whoever sent me the link to them, Stuart. But Julian Simon is an economist, I believe, by training. And he has a quote. I got two of his videos in my favorites, so you can find him in there. It's a 5-part interview with him. It's fantastic. You ought to take a bit of. He's into appreciation. He says we should appreciate the fact that our children don't die of polio or whichever. But here's a quote from him that I want to speak to for a bit. And I mentioned this buried somewhere in the middle of one of my Capitalism Great Depression videos. So I'm going to belabor this point a bit because it's really worth the time. Quote, "We all use the same data, but some of us use more than others." Unquote. That's the quote I want to get to, but let me talk to what I mean about that first. I realized when I found out that bin Laden was trained in university by men who are from London. And I realized when I realized that various dictators throughout the Middle East and the Far East were schooled in Paris or in London. When I started realizing these connections, at first my impulse was, this has to be shown to the world. People have to know this. This is evidence that has to be brought to light. But then I happened on a bigger, more significant fact. This information is known. The world knows about this. They draw a different conclusion. So having the evidence before you is one thing, but connecting the thought to the evidence is another thing. Not everybody in history is the genius that can come up with the next brilliant idea. Not everybody in history is the philosopher who can see the forest for the trees. So, those valuable ideas that have been brought in history, which constitute progress, should be pointed out to people if you're trying to communicate ideas to them. In other words, just putting the evidence in front of them doesn't suffice. It clearly doesn't suffice because a lot of evidence for a lot of truth is available around the world, and people see that, they actually live in the midst of it and come to the wrong conclusions. So there's more going on than just that the evidence needs to be shown. Unfortunately, a very large amount of curricular theory in education holds that you should just give the child information and let him synthesize it himself. You should leave him free to develop or grow or flower or bud or blossom his own way, and you shouldn't impose thoughts and conclusions on him. I hope that I've defeated that with what I've said before now, but unfortunately a lot of curricular theory in this nation subscribes to exactly that idea. Not this nation, all kinds of nations across the world. Now, the opposite of just piling evidence in front of the kid and then saying things, go home, see you tomorrow, and giving him no conclusions. The opposite of that is giving him only conclusions and not giving him any evidence. For example, in California, Leonard Peikoff's daughter was submitted to a 2-day lesson, 2 days of lessons in her classroom on why the UN was so good and why it's helping peace around the world and so forth. Then at the end of this, they were asked to write an essay on their opinion of the UN. They've just been given a 2-day diatribe on the UN's value. Then they're asked to write an opinion on it. That's not giving the kid any evidence. That's just giving him a conclusion. The UN is good. In fact, if you showed the kid the evidence, he would realize that the UN's no good. And a further, more important point is, even if you showed the kid the evidence that the UN is no good, he wouldn't get that either because he's a damn kid. And yet they're having these kids write about their opinion of the UN. By the time they get to the age of 18, they are beyond, you can't get to them. They're beyond the realm of ideas. On the one hand, they may have just said, to hell with this nonsense, Cracker Barrel garbage. I am going to play Nintendo. The world is obviously loony. Or, on the other hand, they've bought into it and said, well, the UN's obviously right. They've told me that since first grade. Everybody knows, that America's evil. Everybody knows that socialism's good. Whatever the tripe of the day is. So you've got to do more to make people intelligent, to educate people, to change their views. You've got to do more than just say, here's the evidence. You've actually got to draw the conclusion for them. That is the duty of the teacher. And the epistemological nature of objectivism, knowing how a concept is formed, knowing the nature of concepts and the nature of thought and thinking. That job is going to be worked out in the future by objectivists. Curricular theory in the future will be straightened out by objectivists. Nobody else has the tools, and I'm afraid a lot of them don't have the desire to do it. So, what thought can you take home with you from this video? If you're telling someone something, draw the conclusion for them. They might draw the wrong conclusion, the conclusion you don't want. If you draw the conclusion for them, they're still free to go off and draw other conclusions, so that's by no means tyrannical to say, here's what I mean by that. But some people hold it as tyrannical to put a kid in school and teach him something. I don't hold that as tyrannical. I think it's tyrannical to put a kid in school and give him just the selected stuff you want to give him, and then not even ask him to think about it. That breeds an attitude on his part that whatever he thinks is just fine. Just take for granted. He doesn't have to justify it to anybody. He doesn't have to explain himself. And it's not really important what he thinks about things. That's the sort of attitude that curricular genre leads to. So, for the value it has, when you're presenting evidence to somebody, remember the necessity not only of presenting the right evidence and in the right order if that's a relevant point, but of drawing the conclusion for them. If you want them to understand what you mean, draw the conclusion for them. That is the nature and duty of teaching.